Good morning, Year 2, back in our lovely little English classroom this morning. So first of all, I just wanted to go through some of the amazing words that you came up with when listening to those B sounds yesterday. So I've put them all into this little B shape. So let's have a look. So the one that came out the most was the zzz, the onomatopoeia sound. Brilliant, well done. We also had buzz, zap, clatter, sing, loud, crash, roar, squish, hum. One person said it sounded like an underground train. Brilliant. Music, busy, splutter, flutter, vibrate, noisy, growl. And they're just the ones that I could fit on the screen. There were so many brilliant words, so well done. So before we start today, we're going to read a little bit more of the Bee Who Spoke. We'll finish it tomorrow, so don't worry, we're nearly there. We're finishing the story. I'm glad you're all enjoying it so much though. So let's just listen to the part of the story from yesterday plus the new bit from today.
Okay, get yourself somewhere nice and comfy so we can read the next bit of the Bee Who Spoke. I've got my blanket and I'm ready to find out what happens next. Once upon a time in the great city of Paris, near Rue Saint-Mystique in the 18th arrondissement, there lived a girl named Belle. Belle loved the city and the city loved her. She knew its alleys and avenues, its rhythms, noises, colours and people by heart. She knew that Monsieur Talgard opened his bakery every morning at 7. Madame Babounou watered her sunflowers at 8, and the bells of the Sacré-Cœur marked 9 o'clock, a full minute after all the other city bells. But as much as Belle loved the city and the city loved her, there was a small piece of her heart in another place altogether. Every year around this time, as the days grew longer, the weather warmer, and ice-cold lemonade became a priority, Belle and her parents would make a very special journey. Belle's trip required careful preparation. For days beforehand she packed and repacked her bag with her most treasured possessions. One penknife, a gift from her father, 5 pencils, each sharpened to a point, one magnifying glass polished to a shine, one new camera saved up for and bought. She added a croissant for emergencies, and last but not least, a brand new journey. If you were to ask anyone in Montmartre about Belle, they would say, Belle sees it all. So she did, and it was all recorded in her journals. After a long journey spent singing songs and playing memory games, they finally arrived at her grandparents' house. Belle was bursting with impatience. Every year Belle's grandfather would work all winter on a gift for her. When she was very small he gave her a hobby horse. When a little older, a tree house. Then last year a beautiful easel. This year her present was something very special indeed. Where did you find that, Papa? Oh, it's a bicycle. It was Belle's mother's bicycle from when she was a girl. Belle had gazed longingly at it a million times in the picture on her mother's dressing table, and now here it was right before her, freshly painted and gleaming in the sun. She could hardly breathe for excitement. Belle threw her bag in the basket, rang the bell twice, and headed off down the lane as fast as her feet would pedal. "Don't get lost!" shouted her father after her. "Don't be late for tea," added her grandmother. "Ride like the wind!" cried her grandpa, laughing. But Belle was already gone. The first thing people from the city always notice when they get to the countryside is the sky. It seems bigger, bluer, more sky-like, stretching as far as the eye can see. Belle saw clouds tumbling into one another, a bird hovering above a patchwork of fields, the tops of the trees swaying in the wind. What she didn't see was the root of a great oak tree in her path. There was a bump, followed by a whoa, followed by a clatter, then an ow. All the animals and insects fell silent. Even the breeze seemed to stop for a moment. Belle looked down. Her skirt was covered in dust. She had a bruised knee, but worst of all she had an uneasy feeling in her stomach. She was lost. Belle didn't know the country, and the country didn't know her. "Hello," she called out in her smallest voice. "Hello," came a friendly voice in reply, but there was no one to be seen. Confused, Belle grabbed her scattered belongings. Then she noticed a little bee gently buzzing towards her. It inspected her croissant curiously. Then it spotted Belle's journal on the ground. "Belle," it remarked, "what a beautiful name." Belle tried to speak, but the words refused to come out. Finally, 3 did. "Bees can't talk!" exclaimed Belle. "Of course we can," said the bee. "You just have to know how to listen." Belle has come top of her class in biology, but at no time has anyone ever mentioned that bees can talk. The bee's voice was wise, thoughtful, and kind. It made the bee seem much bigger than it was. "I think I'm lost," said Belle. She was determined not to cry. "Why, there's a map all around you," said the bee reassuringly. But Belle could only see trees. The bee buzzed a little closer and folded its arms, a bit like her biology teacher when she was about to explain something new. "Do you like adventures?" it asked. "I live for them," replied Belle, brightening. "Then I'd like to take you on a little journey," said the bee. The bee led Belle to a clearing full of flowers. "Belle, meet Arnica, Arnica, meet Belle," said the bee. She peered closer. The flower looked familiar. Suddenly she remembered Madame Babineau's window box. "It looks like a tiny sunflower," said Belle. "They're cousins," said the bee, smiling. The bee showed Belle how to take the petals, press them between her hands, and then rub the oil on her knee. At once the ache began to fade. Belle's eyes widened in astonishment. "That's nature," finished the bee. "Come, I have some more friends I'd like you to meet." The bee knew everyone, and everyone knew the bee. "What a busy place," said Belle, as they stopped to let an army of ants pass through the forest floor. "In nature, we all have a job to do," said the bee. "What's yours?" asked Belle, as they arrived at a particularly tall tree. "Ah," said the bee, puffing with pride, "nature gave us the most important job of all."
Okay, we've got to find out a little bit more. So not only can the bee speak, but it's taking Belle on an adventure. And he has started to talk about the bee's important job. So that is what we're going to focus on for the next 2 days. This is the page from the book, a bit closer up. What habitat is this? Have a think to yourself. Remember, habitat is the name for a place where animals live. Excellent. I would call this a woodland habitat. What animals can you see? Have a look. How many animals can you spot? What can you see? I can see a woodpecker in the tree over here. I can see, there's the bee who spoke. I can see rabbits and squirrels and a deer and a fox. There are so many, and look at the army of ants right along the bottom here. So there are so many animals in this one habitat. Now have a think. How do those animals need each other? So we know animals in a habitat need each other. Can you remember why? Well done. Hopefully you've remembered they need each other for their food chain. So they help each other to survive. And the bee said, in nature we all have a job to do. And he was right. Bees have 2 very important jobs. They have an important job involving food chains and an important job involving pollination. Today we are going to focus on food chains, and tomorrow we'll look at pollination. So here is a food web. It's quite big, so instead of having a chain from top to bottom or left to right, it's gone out into a web to show you just how important bees are. So here is bee in the middle, and we know that bees eat flower nectar. Now remember, the arrow means is eaten by, so the flower nectar is eaten by the bee. But the bee is eaten by a wasp, a toad, and a spider. The spider is eaten by a bird, which is eaten by a fox. So the bee is really important because it feeds the spider, toad, and the wasp. And if you look over here, just behind my face, there is honey. And bees make honey, and mice eat the honey, so they're also important for that. Now imagine there were no bees. These animals here would go hungry. The flowers wouldn't get pollinated, but if we look at the food web, the wasp would go hungry, the opossum would go hungry, the toad would go hungry, and the spider would go hungry. And if there was no bee, there'd be no honey, so the mouse would also go hungry. So, if there's no food for the toad and he's really hungry, eventually the toads might also die out, which would mean there would be no food for the snake, which would mean there would be no food for the hawk. So can you see just how important that one little animal is? If we remove that from our food chain, from our web of chains, all these other animals would start to go hungry and might die out themselves. So that's why bees are so important in the food chain. And the reason they're a bit more important than other animals as well is because they also make honey, which starts a whole new food chain here for the mouse. So we're going to think today about ways we can protect bees because we know how important they are now in food chains. So how can we protect the bees? I've thought of a few ideas. We can plant bee-friendly plants, such as dandelion. That means they always have nectar to eat, so they won't go hungry, and they're also then able to make honey. We can make sure we buy honey from beekeepers. Now, we know we can buy honey in the shop, but if you have a local beekeeper that lives near you and you buy honey from them, that money goes to help keep those bees alive. You can also keep water trays outside for the bees to hydrate on, especially in the summer when it gets really hot and they're far away from their hives. Sometimes they can get dehydrated. Remember, Mrs. Gren, everything needs water to survive. You can also protect swarms, so you might get a big swarm of bees living somewhere in your house. It's important when that happens that rather than just killing it or throwing it out, that we protect it and we get special people in to move them and keep them safe somewhere else that isn't our home. And the last thing I thought of was to build a hive. You can make a hive and put it in your garden for the bees to live in because that gives them a head start. They don't have to worry about building their own hive. There are lots of other things we can do to protect bees as well. You might have thought of some yourself. Some of you have actually sent me videos or pictures of you who have found bees around your house and then have fed them water and sugar to keep them alive. So that's excellent. You're already ahead of the game. Well done. So today we're going to use that to make some posters about saving bees. So I want you to pick one of the reasons from this list, and there's also a few extra down the side, or you might think of one yourself, and make a poster to tell people to save the bees because we now know they are important. Remind yourself, why are bees important? Well done, they are an important part of the food chain. Excellent. Now, because this is English on your poster, I want you to take real care with your handwriting, your capital letters and your punctuation. So that's our full stops, our exclamation marks or our question marks, or even a comma. So you can see here, my first sentence I've got a capital letter, save the bees, comma, and because it's a poster I put another capital letter, plant more weeds, exclamation mark. And I made it rhyme to make it nice and catchy. So I want you to think of a catchy catchphrase such as save the bees, plant more weeds. I want you to make sure you do neat handwriting, capital letters, good punctuation, and then make it pretty, make it stand out. Imagine that you have gone and put this poster outside your house so that all your neighbours know to save the bees. You want a poster that they will look at and remember. So enjoy and send me a picture when you are done.